Let's go.
Hello and welcome to the latest talk on my Healthy Hormone series. And today we're going to be talking about secondary infertility and egg sharing, among other things, including IVF and the process of trying to have a baby with a second partner. So my guest today didn't want to be identified, so I'm going to call her Anna for the purposes of this call. That's not her real name, and I'm going to switch my own video off now because I think it will be less distracting for anybody who's watching this, and you can just listen along to our conversation. So I'm going to do that right now, and welcome, Anna. And thank you for talking to me today. Could you just start by giving us a brief sort of summary of your situation and where you're at right now? Hiya.
Thanks for having me. So we are quite a few years into our IVF journey with secondary infertility. I had 2 children before I was 20. I then met my partner. We tried for a baby. For quite a while, we didn't manage to fall pregnant, went to our GP and followed the IVF route from there. We found out that I had a bilateral tubal blockage and our only route was IVF.
Right. And so this tubal blockage, that could you just explain a bit about how that came about and what that actually means?
Yeah. So with my second pregnancy, they actually discovered after 2 weeks of me being at home that I had retained some placenta, and it had caused a uterus infection, and it had just gone undiscovered. They didn't realise it had caused the infection, and we didn't find out that that had caused scarring problems and adhesions and things like that, years later.
Yeah. That sounds like it. Is it painful? Is it something that you notice all the time or just at certain times?
No, it's not something I notice at all. It isn't something I knew I had until they did various scans, through the IVF process. So I don't feel any pain. It isn't something I knew I had until they discovered it. And by the time we went to our IVF journey, from my last pregnancy, my youngest child was about 8. So I'd had it for quite a long time and had no idea that those adhesions were there. They just assumed that the infection passed by itself. And that was the after effects, essentially.
Right. And so I'm quite interested because I've got friends and clients who have had a child with a previous partner, and then when they have difficulties with the second partner, they've often been told that they're not eligible for IVF because they've already got children. So does that mean that you've had to go and pay privately?
We did. We had to self-fund our IVF treatment. So the only thing that we ever got for free on the NHS were our initial hormone tests and my husband's sperm tests. They were done by our GP, just straightforward blood tests. To check my hormone profile, to check my husband's sperm count, and that was it. After that, we were essentially told that because we had children and they couldn't find anything wrong with us, that we would have to self-fund our IVF via an NHS clinic or via a private clinic.
And so obviously you did decide that that was the route you were going to take. And I mean, when you had these tests, did you explore other sort of alternative routes? And I mean, I know you've told me in the past that you've done every kind of fertility diet, and did you both change your lifestyles in any way, or did you sort of carry on with
Initially we did, because it took them quite a while to find out that I had the bilateral tubal blockage. So initially their route was that they were going to put me on a Clomid course. And before they do that, they have to check that you don't have tubal blockage, because if they increase your ovulation and you obviously have problems, it can end up in an ectopic pregnancy. So they have to check that first, and that's how they discovered that I had the bilateral tubal blockage. So initially we, you know, changed our lifestyle. We'd already previously given up smoking a couple of years beforehand. You know, we ate healthier. We did quite a lot of things. You know, my husband changed his shower routine. He didn't spend
What do you
anywhere
mean
near
by
as long in a hot bath. Well, because hot
right?
showers aren't a great thing for men's sperm count, right? So you kind of don't have to have a hot shower. No laptops on his lap. You know,
Yeah,
you go to the extreme when you want to have a baby, and we
yeah,
tried everything we could,
yeah,
and
and
none of it worked.
yeah. I mean, so far,
No, not yet.
yeah. And one of the things to say about sperm quality and things like that is that I feel like, well, through experience as well of work, that you know, everything's very much focused on the woman, and I think it's because typically it's the woman that has to have the injections and the tests, and it's the woman that actually becomes pregnant. But you know, the man's contribution is equally as important.
It's
It's
50%, right? I
critical.
mean,
Yeah, and
if you look at the way conception happens, it's 50-50 DNA.
yeah,
So your sperm, if you have got issues with morphology, or you've got issues with mobility or
yeah,
of your sperm, you know, and things like that, and there are things that you can do to improve it, you're going to
yeah,
expect your partner to stick herself with a needle 3 times a day. You
yeah,
know, I'm sure you can change your
yeah.
diet.
I don't know whether you've ever seen the Netflix documentary called One More Shot, I think.
I
And
haven't.
it's very good. I would recommend it. It's about, well, I mean, you might not want to watch it because you've been going through it yourself, but it's about a couple's 4-year journey through IVF. And there's this very, I mean, it's kind of funny the way they filmed it, but like you say, you know, the woman is there injecting herself several times a day, and
And that's not all. I mean, that's just the injections. You know, we're not even talking about the hormone changes
yeah,
in what happens to us
well,
when we're injecting us, the risks that we take through overstimulation of our ovaries. We can die. You know, categorically, that's the bottom line. If we are overstimulated and it's not caught in time, that's
yeah,
our life. That's not
yeah.
messing about. I'm sure you can change your diet, give up smoking, knock drinking on the head for a few weeks
Mhm.
until they've, you know, they've got
Well,
your
I
sample.
think the point that I was getting to is that I think it's very easy, particularly for the man, to think, oh, well, you know, why do I need to cut down drinking or caffeine or not carry my phone in my pocket near my tackle? You know, it all
Yeah,
of it helps. All those little things help. And if
you
you
know,
imagine that if your female partner has got poor cervical mucus or blockages or you know anything going on with her health, the stronger he can make his sperm the better, because it's going to have a
oh,
lot
of course,
chance of getting to that egg. And
of
so
course.
it's very important that the man really embraces his side of things and how much you know he can help. And I think that also couples can bear in mind that you know this is a sort of temporary, like the fertile years, they go on for years, but there does of course
For
come a point
men,
when they
for
end.
men
Yeah,
they might,
well,
but
for men, yeah,
for women, our fertility rate falls off the cliff. You know, and let me make it clear that I'm not just talking about sperm giving partners. When I say that women need support when they're going through this process, you know, if you are a female partner of a woman going through IVF, or you're a male partner and you're using donor sperm, don't think that your contribution to supporting her doesn't count. Don't
mm-hmm.
think that you going on the same diet, that you eating the same food, that you not having a glass of wine while she's drinking non-alcoholic Ribena, you know, don't think that that doesn't go towards building that foundation
Mm.
for that support network. Because if you think it's tough now, trust me when I say this, that 4 a.m. feed ain't no fun either.
Yeah,
You know, it isn't. It's
yeah,
difficult. You think it's tough now, wait until your baby comes.
yeah. And of
Wait
course
until you're pregnant.
you're in that unusual position of that you have been pregnant before, you have got two
Exactly.
children, so you do know exactly what is coming down the line
Mm-hmm.
for you,
The
hopefully
pressure that puts
again.
on a couple. You
And
know, lots of couples don't make it through the IVF process.
Yeah.
And I understand why. It is a very, very stressful experience.
Mm.
Um, that's without the added stress, you know, of the possibility of miscarriages.
Hmm.
Some couples face the possibility of they have to have genetic testing. You know, some couples face the possibility of donor eggs, donor sperm, donor embryos, even.
Yeah.
Um, so there are a lot of added extras on top, and that's not to mention the financial cost when you're
Yeah.
going through it and you have to pay for it. So
Yeah.
it puts a lot of pressure, you know, that a normal, I say normal, that a couple without fertility problems wouldn't have.
Mm. And this is something I wanted to ask you, because obviously you've completely understandably you decided to be anonymous for this call, but I also know that you've told me previously that even your friends don't know what you've been going through. So where do you get your support from?
I mean, I decided not to tell my friends. There are one or two close friends to me that know that we are, you know, are having to have IVF to conceive, but they don't know when we're going through our IVF cycle. They
Right.
won't. I won't tell them, you know, when we've got consultancy appointments, or when our embryo transfer might be, or when our egg collection dates are, because
Mm.
I just don't feel that, you know, it's that added expectation, that added apprehension, because they of course want you to have children. You know,
Yeah.
they know how much you want to have kids. These are your nearest and dearest. They get it. They, you know, then you even down to, you know, my family, for example, my mum, my sister, etc. I wouldn't be specific with them, um,
Yeah.
simply because it's that added expectation. And when it doesn't work, you don't want to have to say to people, not this time. So
Yeah.
there's no, you know, if the disappointment is just you, sometimes it's a lot easier to manage. Other people don't find that. You know, some people, of course, seek support and comfort in their nearest and dearest. Lots of people go completely public about their IVF journey,
Mm.
and all kudos to them. Great, but it's not the way lots of people want to do it. And I find that when people go through it like this, it sometimes feels like an added pressure.
Mm.
You know.
Definitely, I completely understand. And in fact, another call that I recorded and posted earlier this week was with a local colleague called Emma, who works with, she teaches pregnancy yoga and birth preparation and stuff. And she's had her own struggles with fertility. And she shared a story about how her neighbour one day said, "Oh, better hurry up, you know, get on with having number two or something." And
Yeah, I've actually even been asked if I'm pregnant.
have you? Oh. I
Yeah,
mean, people,
yeah,
it really baffles me that people are so, they don't mean
candid.
to be, of course, but it's so insensitive, because 1 in 7 couples today in the UK has trouble conceiving. So the chances are we all know somebody, if it isn't us, you know, we all know somebody
That we're
in our
connected in
circle.
some way to, yeah. It's
Yeah.
not just that. There are also people out there that don't want to have kids. You know,
Yeah.
shock horror. I know that a lot of people that are going for IVF are desperate for children. Of course we are, but there are some people out there that just don't want to have children.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and
and
they're sort of not believed, are they? It's like,
no,
you know, why are
no,
you not allowed to say that you don't want to be a parent? And
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's different for everybody, right? You know, I just think it. I think a lot of people seem to have this sort of program where you go to school, you finish school, you get a good job, you meet somebody, you get married, you get a home, you get a family, and that's it. You
mm,
retire.
mm,
Um, well, this isn't that. You know,
no,
some people don't choose to do it that way anymore, but I think a lot of people are still just automatically programmed to think that's the next step. So they just assume, you know, it's like the when are you getting married question.
yeah,
Um, they just don't think that there's some sort of emotional issue with that. But of
yeah,
course, for a lot of couples, that's a very uh, wait with bated breath question. You know, you go to family gatherings, you see people at christenings. Christenings are the worst, of course, aren't they? Because there's babies, or you've got
yeah,
naming ceremonies where someone's had a new baby.
yeah,
You know, they can be very difficult. Or pregnancy announcements are always one that people with IVF tend to avoid. Um,
hmm,
I've had to unfollow people because they talk about their pregnancy. I don't want to stop them talking about their pregnancy and celebrating that, but
yeah,
I don't want to see it.
yeah,
You know, yeah, it's a struggle, but there are lots of online options. And not to name drop, but Fertility Friends is probably one of the best anonymous places for support that I've ever found.
Mm-hmm.
And the ladies on there are great. They have been through every journey you can imagine, and there are pages of their own personal diaries on there, all completely anonymous.
Yeah.
And they're really spilling it out from the heart. You can definitely find your tribe on there, because all these women, partners, girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands, in any shape or form, they're on there too. And there's a lot of information out there for people in our position that just need to let it all out.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. I'd forgotten about that forum actually, but yeah, that's a good idea for people to go there, because I do think that a bit like being in lockdown, it's driving some couples apart and it's bringing some closer together. But regardless, even in ordinary life, we are different to men. Our partners don't always understand what's going on for us emotionally and physically, and vice versa. And we all need some kind of outlet where we can just be our true selves. And I think it's also because this is such a sort of personal and private topic. I completely understand why people don't necessarily want to share it with their family and friends, and you don't want to make, say, your parents worry about you, because
Let's get blunt here, right? You don't tell, when you're trying to naturally conceive, do you phone your mother up every time you've done the deed? Of course you don't. You don't sit there and share with them exactly, the mechanics of how you've had that baby or how you've created that baby. So why are people with IVF expected to share that?
Yeah.
You would never, sit there and have that conversation with your mum and dad.
And I think also
why would you?
And because I know, previous clients I've worked with on fertility, they may have been going through the IVF process alongside the treatments and the appointments. And one of them in particular said, this is just such a haven to, I think that they found that people in fertility clinics were sympathetic and kind, but it's still a very sort of medical, clinical environment.
Completely.
It doesn't fit, I'm thankful I haven't had to go through that myself, but I can imagine that you probably feel like a bit of a specimen, and you
feel like a number.
Yeah.
We went via an NHS clinic. We actually changed NHS clinics after our initial appointment for our egg donation, because we wanted to egg share. Not only does it cut the cost, but we've had people close to us that have had to use donor eggs, and people close to us that have had to use donor sperm, etc. So it just made sense for us. And I always remember a sticking point was after I had the initial consultation at our first NHS IVF clinic about egg sharing, and we'd filled out all of the forms and things like that. And she looked at me and she turned around and said to me, "Well, you better get a move on, because you're getting on a bit."
And how old were you at this point?
I was 30.
Wow.
I was 30. And I thought, wow. Wow. They dealt with me as if it certainly didn't feel like I was paying for my service, and we were paying £180 to see a consultant, the same consultant that we would see if we were on, a fully funded cycle. Don't be disillusioned. The consultant is different. If you're being seen in an NHS hospital, the likelihood is you're being seen by an NHS fertility consultant. And they also work privately. That was the same when we changed clinics to a different clinic. And it just didn't feel like it was a personal service at all. It completely felt like, do this, go in this room, do that.
And I think that's one of the things that I love about Chinese medicine and the approach that I can take with my clients, because it's very holistic and it's very bespoke to that person, and it's easily adaptable. So it's not just a one size fits all, every infertile or person who's difficulties with conceiving, it goes through the same treatment. It's very personal to that person, and I think it's traumatic, isn't it, what you're going through, the immense levels of stress on every
completely stressful. We had a cancelled cycle because I was overstimulated, because they had just put me, you're talking about a one size fits all, they just put me on a normal protocol straight away, and that was it. No consideration was sort of taken into account that I've got PCOS or that I might react differently to the drugs. I was completely overstimulated. But the one thing I would definitely mention when you talk about, holistic therapy and stuff, you have to be 100% honest with your consultant about whatever you are taking, whether that is multivitamins, whether that be essential oils, because a lot of them can really interfere. And firstly, a lot of essential oils aren't safe in pregnancy. So they're not safe when you're going through fertility treatment, if they're not safe during pregnancy. A lot of people don't realize this. Raspberry leaf induces labor. So you shouldn't, there are lots of things that you have to speak to your consultant about. So it shouldn't just be taken, oh yeah, this is a natural remedy, it's not going to affect anything, because it certainly can. And the more honest you are with them, the more they are likely to be able to adapt your protocol. Drugs do not agree with me. I remember when I went down for my initial egg collection, and I was so very, very ill. The drugs just don't agree with me at all. It's definitely something that needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, could you tell us a bit more about what happens when you egg share? Because it's not that I wouldn't imagine that the listeners are that familiar with it unless they've been through it themselves. So what do you have to do? And
when you egg share, initially you have to fit criteria for that clinic. A lot of them will have an age limit, and a lot of them will have a limit for your AMH levels. Can't remember which way around they are. It's been a long time since I've had
AMH.
AMH, well done, thank you. And they have a limit for your AMH levels. They'll also have a limit for your LH levels and things like that. So initially you'll go through all of those hormone checks, all of those tests. You'll also go through historical family illnesses, anything that's hereditary, anything that you may be able to pass on to somebody, essentially what is somebody else's child. Let's not get this mixed up here. What you are giving them is a cell. It is like a cheek cell, like a skin cell. It is not a child. And if you think that it is, you shouldn't be egg sharing.
Right.
If you have that kind of attachment to, and you can't differentiate, you're going to find it very, very difficult to give away your half of your eggs. Because you're not just giving away one, you're giving away half. You're then going to find it even more difficult if it comes back that the recipient is successful with their pregnancy and you're not. You'll find it then even more difficult when you could find out potentially the sex of that child and any future children that are born. And then in the future, 18 years time, that child could come knocking on your door. So if from the get-go your connection with your one single cell is, this is my child, I really, really recommend you seek some serious counselling, and your IVF clinic will give you that. When you're going through the donor process, they do it when you're going through the IVF process regardless, but you also have to see a counsellor, and they go through things like that with you about how you feel, if the woman was to fall pregnant and you weren't, what your reasoning behind sharing your eggs are. So once you've gone, sorry, go on.
I'm just wondering, this sounds like sort of something different to, I'm just wondering why were you going down this egg sharing route? Were you receiving donor eggs as well, or were you
no. So
I've got healthy eggs and
my eggs are completely healthy. My eggs are completely healthy. My issue for falling pregnant naturally is those eggs can't get anywhere down my fallopian tube. There is no way. So there's no way that egg can be fertilized into an embryo. And if by chance it's fertilized, it will just be an ectopic pregnancy.
So is that something that you just decided to do on top of the IVF? I mean,
Well, as I said, initially, what happens is so we had people close to us that had been through the egg donor process, so they had to receive donor eggs. They
mm-hmm.
wouldn't have had their children if they
Yeah.
hadn't received donor eggs. You know, there are LGBT couples that we know that have had to have donor sperm or donor eggs.
Yeah.
So there are people close to us that have, you know, had to receive donor eggs, and it made sense for us. You know, I've got healthy eggs. We can give
Mm-hmm.
somebody else the opportunity to have a baby that they are longing for. You
Mm.
know, women that have to have donor embryos, hats off to you. Like, that is a very emotional process
Mm.
to even get to the point where you know that you need a donor embryo. Lots of these women have already been through IVF with their own eggs by this point.
Mm.
You know, they've gone through maybe the process of having miscarriages, of having genetic testing, and finding out that they can't potentially biologically create their own embryo. I
Yeah.
won't say they can't create their own child, because they grow their child, you know, but
Yeah.
biologically they're unable to create their own embryo. So it just made sense for us, and it made the process less expensive. You know,
Yeah.
don't think that money isn't a factor here, because you have to pay for all of your own medication. You're
Yeah.
paying for journeys back and forth to the IVF clinic. You're, you know, paying for blood tests sometimes. You're paying for consultancy, or, you know, appointments and things like that, and it
Yeah.
adds up.
Mm-hmm.
But donor, you know, egg sharing was just something that made sense to us.
Mm.
And we managed to share 8 eggs to the recipient and 8 eggs to us.
Yeah.
So that was great. You know, our recipient went on to have a child when our IVF didn't happen fast. We had a miscarriage,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't find out the sex of that child, or, you know, if they've had any other children afterwards, because they're not my children.
Yeah.
If they come back when they're 18, I'll explain exactly to them what I've just said to you. They're
Yeah.
not my children. I'm quite happy to tell them about family history, you know, medical history or anything like that, but potentially they're not my kids.
Yeah. And so what's the next step for you guys, if that's not too
We've
personal?
got embryos. No, we've got embryos in the bank, and we could potentially just go back and have another frozen embryo transfer,
Mm.
which we probably will. We're not sure. It's not that we don't want to have children, but this journey has been such a long process for us,
Mm.
emotionally, medically, physically, mentally, financially. It is draining. You
Yeah.
know. Great, yet some people fall pregnant first time when they have IVF. Some
Mm.
people it takes 6, 7, 8 times. Some people, you know, get a second mortgage. Some people
Yeah.
traveling abroad. This is a lifelong commitment, because and obviously having your child is a lifelong commitment, right? But
Mm.
this starts before you even have your child, and you
Mm.
might not even have the guarantee of having that child.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of grit and determination, but also don't think that you're not capable. You know, when you want something, yeah, you're capable of getting it. It's
Yeah.
just the route that you take. So for us, it just depends, I think, on, you know, when we reassess the situation after we come out of this craziness, obviously,
Yeah. I mean, this is just,
our current situation.
yeah.
And again, a lot of people, because of this current situation, would have had cycles cancelled, would
Yeah.
have had their treatment put on hold. You know, lots of people that were expecting to receive donor embryos, donor
Mm.
eggs, donor sperm, etc., etc. It's just not happening, you know, or they've been on treatment and now they can't go and have their eggs retrieved. And there's going to be a lot of people out there that need guidance and support when it
Mm.
comes to what to do next. But for us, we still have the option, if we want to, of going back and having a frozen embryo transfer. And I
Mm.
guess we just need to decide when and if we will.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know if I can call it a good thing, but perhaps the fact that you've already been through so much and you understand the process and what it all involves, that it might have helped you to just say, okay, we're just going to park this for now till things settle down. Whereas,
Oh, definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong. The first cycle, I was completely obsessed. You know,
yeah.
I was completely obsessed with eating the right thing, making sure my injections weren't a minute late, You're having to mix up injections and snap the tops of glass vials off, and your hands are shaking like a leaf.
Yeah.
People are sweating and passing out before doing their injections and things like that. It's not an easy process. And that's not to mention the hormone problems you go through when you are on treatment. Let's not sugarcoat that. It is hell sometimes. You're essentially going through what is a mini menopause. And what women also don't realize is that IVF drugs can alter your hormone profile indefinitely. So these drugs can actually cause hormone imbalances permanently. It's not, this isn't just, oh yeah, she'll just have some injections and we'll get pregnant. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
People need to be aware of the risks, and they need to be aware that sometimes it isn't all rosy, sometimes it isn't all great, but when it is, what a miracle.
Absolutely. And I think you sort of described perfectly. I know this is what I was discussing with this lady Emma, that people come out with all these platitudes like, oh, just relax and it'll happen, and just do this, it's not meant to be, and
just go on holiday, just try again.
Exactly. And I think, but the desire, I know, thankfully for me, I didn't have any trouble conceiving. I carried my baby to full term. He's now 5.5 and or nearly 6, and I didn't have an easy pregnancy, and that's a whole other story. But I was 39 when I had him, and I started to feel very agitated as I got into my 30s, and very sad.
It was too late. Yeah,
I was going to miss the boat and miss my opportunity to become a mother. And I just, ever since I can remember, I just had it in my mind that I would have children, and that was that.
Yeah.
And
I always thought I'd have a huge family. I've always said that I'd have lots and lots of children. I'd be the mum with 6 or 7 kids by now. But it just didn't happen like that for us. And sometimes you have to let go of that. You have to let go of the life that you think you were going to live. And that's not just in terms of fertility, that's just in terms of everything, right? Life, when you tell life you've got a plan, it's going to throw you a curveball. But it does. But also, not to mention, there are single women out there that go through this IVF process. Single women that like you get to a certain age in their life and they think, have I left it too late? The desire for me to be a parent is huge, and I'm going to go and do it alone. Those women don't have the similar support from their partners, friends and stuff like that, someone to hold their hand when they go through the scans before embryo transfer and stuff. It's not an easy thing to do. And if my message is anything to all of these women, is make sure you're ready for a roller coaster ride. It's definitely the biggest white knuckle you're ever going to be on. The first time you go round, you might have to go round again and again, or the first time you go round, you might jump off with a perfect souvenir photo. It's not the same for everybody.
No, I think that's good advice, and it's it's hard for women to keep on top of the anxiety levels, because I think that's the point, isn't it, that you might get lucky on your first round, but then you might not carry to term, or they're just,
of course,
it's sort of like when you buy a house. This is a trite example, but I always think when you buy a house, until you've got those keys in your hand, anything can go wrong at any moment. And
then let's not be under any illusion that the minute you walk through the front door that your plumbing isn't going to burst and your electrics aren't going to go.
Exactly.
Because it can. And that's my point. It's not just IVF, it is then the pregnancy afterwards. Lots of women are very, very anxious about pregnancy. I know I am, even now. Even if we go through it again, definitely already anxious, and I haven't even started my IVF journey again. So if I'm already anxious now about the pregnancy, I definitely will be at the time. And then even after the pregnancy, once baby's there, lots and lots of parents are watching over their newborn, and they can't take their eyes off of them.
I know
it sounds completely ludicrous, but if they should try to do anything, it genuinely is just live in every moment. Don't think about what might happen at the next appointment. Don't think about what might happen at the next scan or what might happen in 6 months' time. Just take every moment as
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
and what will be will be. I
Yeah.
know that is so cliche and everybody's rolling their eyes at me going, oh, that's just like telling us, oh, if you relax, it'll happen. But my point is that you can't control this.
No,
You
I think
can't.
what you're saying is just be in the moment. Like yeah, exactly. We don't know what the outcome's going to be from one day to the next. We never know what's around the corner. So if we try to avoid sort of, projecting it, because I think we all probably know the woman who's, got the nursery planned out before they've even conceived
Definitely.
and stuff like that.
Oh, and don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with seeing that and having that that dream. There's nothing wrong with putting those plans out there to the universe. I'm a strong believer in karma and and things like that. Not karma as in what goes around comes around, but as in what you put out you get back.
Mm-hmm.
If you put out that positive, upbeat, okay, I'm just going to take it head on and I'm just going to deal with what's in front of me, then I think that's a much better option. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with dreaming about what colour your nursery might be. When you're a young woman or when you're a young girl, you pick out baby names, right? And you've got no idea whether you're even going to have kids. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think you just need to get through it however you do you.
Yeah.
If that means you screaming into a pillow at 4 a.m., do it. If that means you walking the dog every morning, do it. If that means, humdrumming and meditation in your garden, then why not? Throw everything at it. You're throwing all that money, all that effort, all of that emotion at it. Throw some positive stuff at it, definitely.
Yeah. And I think
it's about picking those moments.
Yeah, and what I'm hoping to do with all these conversations that I'm having with people like you who are going through these difficult times is to give women the message that they're not alone. There are lots of people who've been through the same thing, who completely understand what it feels like. And whether you reach out anonymously for support on a forum, or you find yourself a therapist or an alternative health practitioner, somebody like me, or actually me, I can't do hands-on treatments at the moment because of lockdown, but I do work online. So there's lots of support out there, and
Definitely.
lots of information, which in itself is very overwhelming at times. So I like to be there to sort of support and guide people through the process from a sort of holistic perspective. And do you have one kind of final takeaway, a bit of advice for the listeners before we wrap up?
Find moments of laughter. I know that when people are going through their IVF journey, it never feels like, there are points where you never feel like you might smile again. I know for us it was having a cancelled cycle, being told we had too many eggs. You kind of think to yourself, how can I have too many? Why aren't there enough? You have to find those moments of laughter, otherwise you find yourself rabbit holing down this IVF journey and you feel like Alice in Wonderland. Like you said, sometimes there's overload, there's so much information. Eat pineapple core, don't eat pineapple core, eat Brazil nuts, eat 5 a day, eat natural yogurt, eat plenty of protein, don't get too fat, don't put on weight, don't do that. It's hell. And find other people that you can talk to that have been through the process, that support women that go through the process, people like you, people that understand the process, so that you've got someone to reach out to. Find what works for you. And remember, you don't have to answer to anybody. This is your journey. Right? You find what works for you, and find women that will support you to do that. And also, so I'm all for everybody making their own decisions and their own choices, and I will 100% support your right to make those decisions and those choices. That you need to find people that are supportive.
Yeah, and I think as an add-on to that, I would say to people, if you've been given a very sort of negative prognosis by your doctor, do go and get a second opinion, because there are so many examples of people who were told that they couldn't have children, it was going to be
Oh, completely.
impossible, and then somebody else said, actually, there's a chance, and then it
Completely.
worked for them. So, don't give
Completely.
up.
There are so many ways around, so many other routes. IVF is not the only option. Carrying your own biological child is not the only option.
Mm,
Using your own eggs, not the only option. Using your partner's sperm, not the only option.
yeah,
IVF in the UK, not the only option. Um, for
yeah,
example, I had an option that I could have had my tubes taken off and put somewhere else, turned inside out. Uh,
right.
that was just a very strange option to me, not something I wanted to do,
Mm,
because it would cause or could cause much more higher risk of an ectopic pregnancy.
hmm.
Um, so there
Yeah.
are lots of options. And then there's adoption. You want to be a parent.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's lots of routes, and it's fine if you don't want to take any of those routes. It's absolutely fine if you get, one cycle into your IVF journey and say, do you know what? I don't want to have kids. This
Yeah,
has been too much. You
yeah,
know, that's okay too. Whatever you are feeling is a valid feeling.
yeah,
It is. It's completely. It doesn't matter what you feel you're going through. Someone else has felt that feeling,
yeah,
even if they're not in the same situation, even if they're not in the same boat. They're definitely riding the same storm.
yeah, yeah. Very
find
good.
find that person that will, even if it is anonymously, definitely anonymously. You can spill your guts, you can read other women's stories, get their experiences, not just through IVF, through pregnancy. As I said, IVF is just the beginning. For all those ladies that are going to be successful or that are successful,
Mm.
oh, you're in for a wild ride.
Yeah. I know that just before we go, this morning, Facebook showed me a memory of some years ago when I must have been like in the late stages of pregnancy, and it's a photo of my cat sort of stretched out in this shaft of sunlight, and I wrote something like, oh, I need to take tips from him on how to relax, once baby arrives or something. And all these comments were like, Sally, this is nothing like parenthood. It's not
This is
relaxing.
not how it's going to happen.
You will not relax
This is
again.
not how it's
And
going to happen. There
yeah,
is no relaxing. The
yeah,
stress starts the second you have conceived, and it
yeah,
doesn't finish ever.
yeah,
Don't think that it disappears when they turn 5, when they turn 10, 15, 20. It doesn't. You
yeah,
are a parent for life.
yeah. But
That's
still,
it.
lots of moments of joy as well. And
Hundreds and thousands of joyous moments that you would never have experienced, any other way.
yeah,
But it is not the only way to experience the joy of children. Nieces, nephews, cousins, relations. Don't think that just because you can't or haven't been able to give birth, or you can't, have a successful pregnancy and stuff like that, that you can't experience that joy of having kids around you, because you definitely can.
yeah. That's brilliant. Well, Anna, thank you so much for talking to me. And it's been really fascinating. And I hope that anybody listening who's going through any of this, whatever beginning or middle or end or come out the other side, I'm sure will take something away from it. I wish you and your husband all the best of luck as you go forward, and I of course hope for a really positive outcome for you both. And if anybody's been um, you know triggered by anything you've heard today, or you want to reach out and talk about it, please feel free to contact me and I will do my best to help you. So all the best, and talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Sally. Bye.
Bye bye. Bye.